The 8-year-old girl thought she'd found a forgotten playground in the Oregon woods, but what Maya discovered hidden beneath the main treehouse cabin would expose the biggest financial crime in state history and put $285 million worth of stolen money back into the hands of those it was taken from. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning fog clung to the valley like a whisper that refused to fade. Maya Chen pressed her small hand against the kitchen window, watching the mist roll through the towering Douglas firs that surrounded their rented house. She was 8 years old, small for her age, with dark hair that never quite stayed in its ponytail and eyes that noticed everything. Her father, David, stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand while checking his phone with the other. He was already dressed for work, worn Carhartt jacket over a flannel shirt, boots laced tight. He'd been up since 5. "Eat quick, sweetheart," he said, sliding a plate in front of her. "I've got to be on site by 7:30. Maya nodded, pouring too much syrup the way she always did. Her father never commented on it anymore. Small pleasures he'd learned mattered more than wasted syrup. They'd been living in this house for 8 months now, ever since the divorce finalized and her mother moved to California with someone new. David had taken a contractor job in Timber Falls, Oregon, population 2,400, where rent was cheap and questions were few. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, peeling paint, but it backed up against 60 acres of dense forest that seemed to stretch forever. Maya loved it. Her father worried about it. "Remember the rules?" he asked as he grabbed his thermos. "Stay where I can see the house. Don't go past the creek. Come inside if I hear anything weird. And text you every hour so you know I'm okay." He kissed the top of her head. "Good girl. I'll be home by 6. Leftover spaghetti in the fridge for lunch." She watched his truck rumble down the gravel driveway, red taillights disappearing into the fog. Then the house fell silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the distant call of a crow. Maya finished her pancakes, washed her plate the way her father taught her, and pulled on her rain boots. The forest called to her the way it always did. She'd spent most of that summer exploring the edges, never going too far, always keeping the house in sight. But today felt different. Today the fog made everything look like a secret, and Maya had always been good at finding secrets. She stepped off the back porch and into the wet grass. The air smelled like cedar and earth. Ferns brushed against her jeans as she walked toward the tree line. She'd been this way a dozen times before, always stopping at the creek, always turning back. But this morning, she heard something. Not scary, just curious. A rhythmic creaking, like a swing moving in the wind. She followed the sound, stepping carefully over fallen logs and patches of slick moss. The creek bubbled beside her, clear and cold. She crossed it on a fallen tree trunk, arms out for balance, and kept going. That's when she saw it. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, just shadows and branches playing games. But as she pushed through a thicket of young alders, the forest opened into a small clearing, and there, rising from the massive trunks of ancient Douglas firs, was a village. Not a single tree house. A village. Her breath caught in her throat. There were at least 7 structures, maybe more, built into the trees at different heights. Some were small, barely bigger than a garden shed. Others sprawled across multiple branches, connected by rope bridges and wooden walkways. The creaking sound came from one of the bridges, swaying gently in the breeze. Maya stood frozen, her heart pounding with the kind of excitement that makes your fingertips tingle. This wasn't some kid's backyard fort. This was real, professional. The railings were carved, the platforms level, the construction solid despite years of weather and neglect. Moss covered the roofs. Vines had begun to reclaim the lower structures, but it was still intact, still waiting. She approached the nearest ladder, testing the bottom rung with her boot. It held. She looked back toward the direction of her house, now completely out of sight. She should go back. She should tell her father. But the pull was too strong. She climbed. The first platform was about 12 feet up, built around the trunk of a massive fir. The floor was solid, made of treated lumber that had weathered to silver grey. There was a small table, its surface warped from rain, and a bench built into the railing. She ran her hand along the wood, feeling the grain beneath her fingers. Someone had spent time here. Someone had cared. She crossed one of the rope bridges, gripping the handrails tight. It swayed beneath her weight, but it felt secure. The next platform was larger, with walls and a door that hung crooked on its hinges. She pushed it open. Inside, light filtered through gaps in the wood. There was a camping cot with a rotted sleeping bag still on it, a metal camping stove, shelves that had once held supplies. Everything was covered in dust and pine needles, but there was an order to it, like whoever lived here had left intending to come back. Maya explored for what felt like hours, moving from structure to structure. Some were clearly sleeping quarters. Others looked like storage. One had a small wood stove with a chimney pipe that had rusted through. Another had children's drawings pinned to the walls, faded and peeling, images of trees and animals and stick figures holding hands. She stopped in front of those drawings, her chest tight. Kids had been here. Kids like her. She found carved names on railings and beams, initials inside hearts, dates from the late 1980s. This place was older than she was, older than her parents almost, and no one seemed to know it was here. At the center of the village, rising taller than all the others, stood the main cabin. It was built into 3 massive trees growing close together, their trunks forming natural pillars. The structure was 2 stories tall, with real windows, glass still intact, and a shingled roof that had mostly survived the decades. A wooden staircase spiraled around one of the trunks, leading up to a wide deck. Maya climbed slowly, her pulse quickening with each step. This was different from the others. This felt important. She reached the deck and stopped. The front door was solid wood, carved with an intricate pattern of leaves and branches. She pushed it open. The hinges groaned, but the door swung inward smoothly. The inside was dim, light struggling through dirty windows. But as her eyes adjusted, Maya gasped. This wasn't a camping shelter. This was a home. The main room had built-in furniture, a table with 4 chairs, a bench beneath the window with storage underneath, shelves lined with old books. There was a fireplace made of river stones, the hearth still holding ancient ashes. Whoever built this had intended to stay. She moved through the space slowly, reverently. In the corner, a ladder led up to a loft. She climbed it, finding a sleeping area with a real mattress, still wrapped in plastic, never used. Back downstairs, she opened the storage bench. Inside were blankets, all vacuum-sealed in plastic bags, perfectly preserved. There was camping equipment, lanterns, a first aid kit, water filtration supplies. Everything someone would need to live off the grid. And then she saw it. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden by a faded rug, was a seam in the floor. She walked over and knelt down, pushing the rug aside. Beneath it was a hatch, about 3 feet square, with a metal handle and a heavy padlock holding it shut. Her breath quickened. The lock was serious, the kind you'd see on a storage unit or a gate, thick and rusted but still intact. She pulled on it, but it didn't budge. She tried the handle of the hatch itself, but it wouldn't lift with the lock in place. She sat back on her heels, staring at it. What was down there? Why would someone put a locked hatch in a secret treehouse in the middle of nowhere? Her mind raced with possibilities. Treasure, supplies, maybe just a root cellar for food storage. But something about the lock felt wrong, felt excessive. You didn't lock away potatoes and canned beans like that. She pulled out her phone, checking the time. It was almost noon. Her father would be expecting a text. She quickly typed, "I'm okay, eating lunch," and hit send. Then she stood, brushing dust from her jeans, and took one more look around. The cabin was larger than she'd first realized. There was a small kitchen area with a hand pump for water, now seized up with rust. There were cabinets built into the walls, all empty except for mouse droppings and old leaves. But everything was built with care, with craftsmanship. This wasn't thrown together. This was planned. She walked to one of the windows and looked out over the village. From this height, she could see all of it, the way the structures connected, the way they were positioned to be hidden from the ground, invisible unless you knew where to look. She spent another hour exploring the other buildings, finding more evidence of long-term habitation. In one of the smaller structures, she found a journal, its pages swollen with moisture and stuck together. She carefully peeled apart a few pages, but the ink had run, making most of it illegible. She could make out a few words, "safe here" and "can't find us," and something that looked like 1987. In another building, she found a box of old tools, well-made, expensive. She found rope, climbing gear, more camping supplies. Whoever built this place had money and skills, and they'd left everything behind. The sun was starting to lower when Maya finally made her way back down to the forest floor. She stood in the clearing, looking up at the village one more time. She should tell her father, she knew that. But something made her hesitate. If she told him, he'd make her stop coming here. He'd probably call the police or the forest service. They'd come in with their trucks and their tape and their questions, and this place would stop being magic. It would become evidence or a hazard or a historical site. It would stop being hers. She made her decision. She'd come back tomorrow. She'd figure out what was in that locked hatch. And then, maybe then, she'd tell her father. She picked her way back through the forest, crossing the creek, emerging into their backyard, just as the shadows grew long. Her father's truck wasn't in the driveway yet. She had time to clean up, to act normal, to keep her secret for one more day. That night at dinner, her father asked about her day. "Did you have fun exploring?" She nodded, pushing spaghetti around her plate. "Just stayed in the backyard mostly, looked at bugs and stuff." He smiled, tired, his hands stained with sawdust. "Good. I'm glad you're careful." She felt a pang of guilt but pushed it down. She wasn't being unsafe. She was being curious. There was a difference. That night, she lay in bed, unable to sleep. The image of the locked hatch burned in her mind. She imagined what might be beneath it, a bunker maybe, or a storage room, or something else entirely. The moonlight filtered through her curtains, casting shadows on the ceiling. She thought about the carved names, the children's drawings, the dates from the 1980s. Had families lived there? Had kids played on those bridges, climbed those ladders, slept in those sleeping bags? Where were they now? Why had they left everything behind? The next morning, Saturday, her father announced he had to work. Emergency call, a roof leak that couldn't wait. He'd be gone most of the day. Maya's heart leapt. More time. She waited until his truck disappeared down the road, then grabbed a backpack. She packed a flashlight, a bottle of water, a sandwich, and something she'd found in the garage, a pair of bolt cutters her father used for cutting chain-link fence. They were heavy, too big for her small hands, but she managed to stuff them in the backpack. She felt a flutter of anxiety. She was definitely breaking rules now, but she had to know. She had to see what was under that hatch. She made the trek through the forest faster this time, knowing the way. The village appeared through the trees like something from a dream. She climbed straight to the main cabin, not bothering with the others today. Inside, she dropped her backpack and pulled out the bolt cutters. Her arms shook as she positioned them on the shackle of the padlock. She squeezed with all her strength. Nothing. She tried again, putting her whole body into it, standing on one handle for leverage. The metal bit into the shackle. She adjusted her grip and squeezed again, harder, her face red with effort. And then, with a sharp crack, the shackle snapped. The lock fell away, clattering to the floor. Maya's hands trembled as she picked it up, staring at the broken metal. There was no going back now. She set it aside and gripped the handle of the hatch. She pulled. The hatch lifted with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in decades. Stale air rushed out, cool and dry. She propped the hatch open and peered down into the darkness. A ladder, metal rungs bolted into concrete, descended about 10 feet into what looked like a tunnel. Her heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't a root cellar. This was something else entirely. She pulled out her flashlight, clicked it on, and aimed the beam down. The tunnel was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide, with concrete walls and a dirt floor. It extended beyond the reach of her flashlight, disappearing into darkness. She swallowed hard. Every instinct told her to close the hatch, to run home, to call her father. But curiosity, that deep, burning need to know, won out. She tested the first rung of the ladder. Solid. She slung her backpack over both shoulders, gripped the flashlight in her teeth, and began to climb down. The temperature dropped as she descended, the air growing colder, drier. Her feet touched the ground, and she stood in the tunnel, breathing hard. The flashlight beam played across the walls. They were smooth, poured concrete, reinforced with rebar. This wasn't amateur work. This was serious construction. The tunnel stretched ahead, straight and level. She started walking, her footsteps echoing softly. The walls were close, almost claustrophobic. But the tunnel was well made, the ceiling high enough that an adult could walk upright. After about 50 feet, she came to a junction. The tunnel split into 2 directions. She chose left, marking the wall with a rock so she could find her way back. The left tunnel curved slightly, then opened into a wider space. She swept her flashlight around and gasped. She was in a room, a concrete room about the size of her bedroom at home. And it was full. Against one wall were metal shelves stacked with plastic bins, all sealed and labeled. Against another wall were filing cabinets, industrial grey, 4 drawers each. In the corner sat a large metal trunk, the kind you'd see in old military movies. The air was dry, almost artificially so. She noticed vents in the ceiling, part of some kind of ventilation system. This place had been designed to preserve whatever was stored here. She approached the nearest filing cabinet and pulled on a drawer. It slid open smoothly, well maintained despite the years. Inside were hanging folders, hundreds of them, all neatly labeled. She pulled one out at random, opened it, and found documents. Legal papers, contracts, financial statements. The names on them meant nothing to her, but the amounts did. She saw numbers that made her eyes widen. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions. She pulled out another folder, then another. All financial documents, all with dates from the 1980s and early 90s. She didn't understand what most of it meant, but she understood that this was important. This was the kind of paperwork adults stressed about, the kind that lived in safe deposit boxes and lawyers' offices. But why was it here? Why hidden in an underground room beneath a secret treehouse? She moved to the plastic bins on the shelves. They were labeled with dates and codes she didn't recognize. She pried open the lid of one. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was cash. Stacks and stacks of it, old bills, 20s and 50s and hundreds all banded together. Her mouth fell open. She opened another bin. More cash. And another. More cash. She stood back, her mind reeling. There had to be millions of dollars here, maybe more. She thought about the locked hatch, the hidden room, the abandoned village. Someone had gone to incredible lengths to hide this, and then they'd left it. Or they'd been forced to leave it. Or something had happened that prevented them from ever coming back. She felt the weight of it pressing on her chest, the realization that she'd stumbled into something far bigger than a forgotten playground. This was a secret that people had protected, maybe killed to protect, maybe died protecting. She pulled out her phone, but there was no signal down here. The concrete walls blocked everything. She took photos anyway. Pictures of the filing cabinets, the bins of money, the documents with their impossible numbers. She didn't know what else to do. She was 8 years old, standing in an underground vault full of what she was starting to realize might be stolen money. She thought about her father, about how tired he always looked, how he counted change for groceries, how he'd apologized last week because he couldn't afford to take her to the movies. And here, beneath the forest floor, sat enough money to change their lives forever. But even at 8, Maya understood that some money came with strings attached. Some money wasn't meant to be found. She carefully closed the bins, pushed the filing cabinet drawers shut, and backed out of the room. She returned to the junction and tried the other tunnel. This one was shorter, leading to a smaller room. Inside, she found more files, but also something else. A corkboard on the wall with papers pinned to it, yellowed and curling at the edges. She approached it slowly, shining her light across the documents. There were newspaper clippings, articles from the 1980s about local government contracts, land deals, construction projects. There were photos of men in suits shaking hands, breaking ground at building sites, standing in front of government buildings. And there were handwritten notes, scrawled in margins and on sticky notes, connecting names and dates and amounts. It looked like something from a detective movie, like someone had been investigating something, trying to piece together a puzzle. At the bottom of the board, one note was circled in red ink, written in all capitals. They know, move everything by October 15th, 1988. Maya stared at the date. 37 years ago. Whatever had happened here, whatever this place was, it had ended in the fall of 1988. The people who built this, who hid this, they'd been running out of time, and apparently time had run out. She took more photos, making sure to capture everything on the board, every clipping, every note, every face in every photo. She didn't understand it yet, but she knew someone would. Someone needed to see this. She made her way back through the tunnels, climbed the ladder, and emerged into the main cabin. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the floor. She'd been down there for over an hour. She carefully lowered the hatch, but she didn't try to replace the lock. There was no point now. The seal was broken. She gathered her backpack, took one last look around the cabin, and headed down the spiral stairs. As she stood in the clearing, looking up at the village, Maya felt something shift inside her. This wasn't her secret to keep. This was evidence of something big enough that people had built an entire hidden compound to protect it. Something valuable enough that they'd buried millions of dollars beneath the forest floor. She thought about the children's drawings, the dates carved into railings, the families who must have hidden here, who must have felt so desperate that this was their only option. And then she thought about her father, about his honesty, about how he'd taught her that doing the right thing mattered more than doing the easy thing. She knew what she had to do. She just wasn't sure how to do it yet. Because even at 8 years old, she understood that telling this story might change everything. It might put them in danger. It might make them targets, but it might also bring justice to people who'd been waiting 37 years for the truth. She walked home slowly, her backpack heavy with the weight of knowledge. When she reached the house, her father's truck still wasn't in the driveway. She went inside, dumped her backpack in her room, and sat on her bed, staring at her phone. The photos were all there, clear evidence of what she'd found. Her finger hovered over her father's contact. She should call him. She should tell him right now. But she hesitated. Once she told him, everything would change. The police would come. Investigators would come. Their quiet life in this rented house at the edge of nowhere would explode into something public, something dangerous. She set the phone down and lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The shadows of tree branches danced across the plaster, moved by a wind she couldn't feel. She thought about the names in those files, about men in suits who might still be alive, who might still be powerful, who might not want anyone to know what she'd found. For the first time since climbing that first ladder, Maya felt afraid. Not of the forest or the darkness or the tunnels, but of what came next. Of the choice she now had to make. Of the truth that now lived inside her, demanding to be told. That evening, when her father came home, she met him at the door. He looked exhausted, his shirt soaked with sweat, his hands scraped and dirty. But he smiled when he saw her, the way he always did, like she was the best part of his day. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" She looked up at him, at his kind eyes and his tired face, and she made her decision. "Dad," she said, her voice small but steady, "I need to tell you something really important, and you're probably going to be mad at me, but I need you to listen first, okay?" His smile faded, replaced by concern. He knelt down in front of her, hands on her shoulders. "Maya, what is it? Are you okay?" She nodded. "I'm okay." But I found something in the woods, something big, and I think we need to call the police." David Chen stared at his daughter for a long moment, trying to read the expression on her face. She looked scared but determined, the way she'd looked when she was 5 and insisted on learning to ride her bike without training wheels, despite falling 3 times. He'd learned not to dismiss that look. "Okay," he said slowly, settling onto the couch. "Show me." Maya pulled out her phone with trembling hands and opened her photo gallery. She handed it to him and watched his face as he scrolled through the images. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like fear. He stopped on a photo of the cash-filled bins, zoomed in, then looked up at her. "Where did you take these?" "In the forest, behind the house. There's a whole village up in the trees, Dad. Like a real village with cabins and bridges and everything. And underneath the main cabin, there's tunnels and rooms full of money and papers, and I think maybe someone was hiding from something bad." David's jaw tightened. He stood up, paced to the window, ran his hand through his hair. "How far did you go into the woods?" "Pretty far, past the creek. But Dad, that's not the point. The point is you went way past where you're allowed to go." His voice was sharp now, edged with fear disguised as anger. "Maya, I told you to stay where you could see the house. Do you understand how dangerous "I know," she interrupted. "I know I broke the rules. You can ground me forever if you want. But you have to see this place. You have to understand what's there." He looked at the phone again, scrolling through more photos. The newspaper clippings, the corkboard with notes, the filing cabinets. His contractor's eye caught details she hadn't noticed. The quality of construction, the professional-grade materials, the systematic organization. This wasn't some survivalist's hideout thrown together with salvaged lumber. This was engineered. "These dates," he said quietly. 1987, 1988. This is almost 40 years old. 37, Maya corrected. The last note said October 15th, 1988, like they were going to move everything but something happened. David sat back down, elbows on his knees, phone dangling from his hands. He was quiet for a long time. Maya watched him think, watched him process, watched him become the problem solver she'd always known him to be. "Tomorrow's Sunday," he finally said. "You're going to take me there, first thing in the morning, and then we're going to figure out what to do." They barely slept that night. David lay awake thinking about construction permits, property lines, legal liability. Maya lay awake thinking about the families who'd hidden there, about why they'd left, about whether they'd been caught or escaped or worse. When dawn broke grey and cold, they were both already dressed. David packed a proper backpack, real flashlights, rope, his tool belt, a first aid kit, water bottles, his camera. He moved with the methodical precision of someone preparing for a job site, but Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. They ate breakfast in silence, neither hungry but both knowing they needed the energy. At 7 o'clock, they stepped into the forest. Maya led the way, retracing her path with confidence now. David followed, his eyes scanning the terrain with a contractor's assessment. He noted the old-growth timber, the density of the canopy, the way sound seemed to die in the undergrowth. When they reached the clearing and the village came into view, he stopped dead. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. It was even more impressive in the morning light. The structures rose from the forest like something out of a storybook, elaborate and impossible. David approached the nearest ladder and examined it closely. He tested the rungs, checked the bolts, ran his hand along the support beams. "This is cedar," he said, more to himself than to Maya. "Marine-grade hardware, lag bolts every 8 inches. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing." He looked up at the network of platforms and bridges. "This would have cost a fortune, $60,000, $70,000 easy, and that's in today's money. Back in the 80s? He shook his head. This was a serious investment. They climbed together, David testing each structure as they went. He pointed out details Maya had missed, the way the platforms were designed to move with the trees, preventing stress fractures. The drainage systems built into each roof. The fact that every piece of wood had been treated against rot and insects. "This was meant to last," he said. "This was meant to be permanent." When they reached the main cabin, he stopped on the deck, staring at the carved door. "I've seen work like this before. This is custom, probably commissioned. You don't find this at a hardware store." Inside, he moved through the space with reverent attention. He opened cabinets, examined joinery, tested the structural integrity of the loft. Everything impressed him. Everything troubled him. "Someone with money and access to skilled labor built this," he said. "Someone who needed a place to disappear to but wanted it to be comfortable, livable long-term." "Dad," Maya said, pointing to the corner, "the hatch." He walked over and knelt beside it, examining the broken padlock she'd left on the floor. "You cut this?" She nodded, not meeting his eyes. He sighed but didn't lecture. Instead, he opened the hatch and shined his flashlight down. "You went down there alone?" "Yes." "Maya, I know, I'm sorry, but you need to see what's down there." David descended first, his broad shoulders barely fitting in the narrow tunnel. Maya followed. At the bottom, he stood still, his flashlight playing across the concrete walls. "This is military-grade construction," he said quietly. "Poured concrete, steel reinforcement, ventilation system. This isn't a basement. This is a bunker." They walked the tunnel together, David examining every detail. When they reached the first room, he stopped in the doorway, his light sweeping across the filing cabinets and storage bins. He didn't speak for a long moment. "Open one of those bins," he said. Maya did. The cash sat there, impossible and real. David stepped closer, staring down at it. He didn't touch it, just looked. "How many bins?" "I counted 23 in this room." He did the math in his head, his expression darkening. "That's millions, easily. Maybe tens of millions, depending on the denominations." He moved to the filing cabinets and pulled open a drawer. He flipped through folders, his frown deepening with each document he examined. "These are county records, land deeds, construction contracts, financial statements from local government accounts." He pulled out a folder labeled Timber Falls Water Treatment Plant, Bid Specifications 1986. He opened it, scanned the contents, and let out a low whistle. "This is all public works projects, roads, sewers, schools, municipal buildings." "Is that bad?" Maya asked. David closed the folder carefully. "It's bad if these records were supposed to be destroyed. It's very bad if the money down here came from these projects." He pulled out another folder, then another. "This looks like someone was skimming funds, inflating costs, paying themselves for work that was never done, falsifying invoices, and then documenting everything." He looked around the room. "Why would someone document their own crime?" "Insurance?" Maya offered. David looked at her sharply. "That's actually not a bad theory. If you're stealing with partners, you document everything so no one can betray you. Mutually assured destruction." They moved to the second room, the one with the corkboard. David spent 20 minutes photographing everything, taking detailed shots of each article, each note, each connection drawn between names and dates. He recognized some of the names from around town, buildings named after them, streets, parks, people who were considered pillars of the community, or had been. "Some of these people are dead now," he said. "But some aren't. Some are still around, still influential." He pointed to one photo, a man in his 40s cutting a ribbon at a building dedication. "That's Gerald Hartman. He was mayor in the 80s. He's retired now, but his son is on the county commission." "So this stuff could still matter?" Maya asked. "If any of this is real, if any of these allegations are true, then yes, this could still matter very much." They climbed back up into the cabin. David sat on the bench beneath the window, his head in his hands. Maya sat next to him, waiting. Outside, a crow called. Wind moved through the branches, making the whole structure creak softly. "We have to report this," he finally said. "I know. But once we do, our lives are going to change. People are going to ask questions. Lawyers are going to get involved. And if some of the people implicated in those documents are still alive and still powerful, He stopped, not wanting to scare her, but needing her to understand. They might not be happy we found this. Maya thought about the note circled in red. They know. Move everything by October 15th. She thought about families fleeing in the night, about secrets too dangerous to keep. What if the people who built this got hurt? She asked quietly. What if that's why they never came back? David pulled her close. Then all the more reason to bring this into the light. If crimes were committed, people deserve justice, even if it's almost 40 years late. What happens next will turn their quiet life upside down, reveal connections to the biggest theft in state history, and remind us that sometimes the truth demands to be told no matter the cost. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. They spent another hour in the village, with David documenting everything. He took hundreds of photos, measured structures, made notes about construction methods and materials. He found more evidence of long-term habitation, a hand-dug well with a manual pump, a composting system, even the remnants of a small garden plot. Someone had planned to live here indefinitely. In one of the smaller cabins, they found children's clothes in a plastic bin, sized for kids ranging from toddlers to teenagers. In another, school books from the late 1980s. Maya found a journal she'd missed before, this one better preserved. David carefully turned the pages. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. Most entries were brief. Day 42, supplies holding. Kids are scared but safe. Day 67, radio says they're still searching. Can't risk going back. Day 93, running out of time. Have to make a choice. The final entry was dated October 12th, 1988. Can't stay anymore. Winter coming. Kids need real shelter, real school, real lives. Moving to the fallback location tomorrow night. Leaving everything here in case we can ever come back. Pray we can come back. David closed the journal carefully. They had kids up here. They were hiding entire families. From who? Maya asked. From whoever they stole from, or whoever was trying to silence them. He looked around the village with new eyes. This wasn't just about money. This was about survival. By early afternoon, they documented everything they could. David had hundreds of photos, detailed notes, and a growing sense that they were standing in the middle of something that could shake their entire county. As they made their way back through the forest, he ran through scenarios in his head. Who to call, who to trust, how to protect Maya while doing the right thing. When they reached the house, he made his decision. I'm calling Sheriff Reeves. Maya's eyes widened. The sheriff? Won't he tell everyone? He's the most honest cop I know. Used to work construction before he went into law enforcement. If anyone can handle this properly, it's him. David pulled out his phone and dialed. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. Reeves. Sheriff, it's David Chen. I rent the old Morrison place on Forest Service Road 12. I know who you are, David. What can I do for you? I need you to come to my house, today if possible. My daughter found something in the woods, and I think you're going to want to see it before anyone else does. There was a pause. What kind of something? The kind that's going to require investigators, maybe federal investigators, and probably lawyers. Another pause, longer this time. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sheriff Jack Reeves was in his late 50s, barrel-chested with grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. He arrived in his personal truck, not his patrol vehicle, which David appreciated. The man understood discretion. They sat at the kitchen table, and David laid out his phone, showing photo after photo. Reeves didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just looked. When David finished, the sheriff sat back and exhaled slowly. How many people know about this? Just the 3 of us, David said. Good. Keep it that way for now. He looked at Maya. Young lady, you just stumbled onto what might be the biggest case this county has ever seen. Can I ask you a few questions? Maya nodded, suddenly nervous. When you found this place, did you see anyone else around? Any signs that someone had been there recently? No, sir. Everything was old, dusty, like no one had been there in forever. Did you touch anything in those underground rooms? Take anything? I opened some bins and drawers to see what was there, but I didn't take anything, just pictures. Reeves nodded approvingly. Smart girl. He turned back to David. I'm going to need to see this in person, today, and I'm going to need to bring someone with me, someone who can help process what we're looking at from a legal standpoint. Who? David asked warily. Janet Morales. She's a district attorney investigator, specializes in financial crimes. She's clean, trustworthy, and she's not from around here, which means she has no local connections to protect. David considered this. Okay, when? Give me 2 hours to make calls. I'll be back at 4 o'clock. Can you take us there? Yes. Reeves stood, then paused at the door. David, I need you to understand something. If this is what I think it is, if those documents show what they appear to show, there are going to be powerful people who wish you'd never found it. People with resources and connections. You're going to need protection. Legal protection at minimum, possibly physical protection depending on how this plays out. Maya felt her stomach drop. David's jaw tightened. Are we in danger? I don't know yet, but I want you to be careful. Lock your doors. Don't talk to anyone about this. Not friends, not family, not co-workers, no one. Understood? They both nodded. After Reeves left, the house felt smaller, the walls closer. David made lunch, but neither of them ate much. Maya sat at the table, pushing macaroni around her bowl, thinking about danger and protection and powerful people. Dad? Yes, sweetheart. Are you scared? He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. A little bit, yeah, but sometimes scared is okay. Scared means you understand the stakes. It means you're being smart, not reckless. Do you wish I hadn't found it? He reached across the table and took her hand. No, never. You found something important. Something that might bring justice to people who've been waiting a long time for it. That takes courage. I'm proud of you. At 4 o'clock sharp, 2 vehicles pulled into the driveway. Sheriff Reeves in his truck and a woman in a dark sedan. She was in her 40s, professional, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She introduced herself as Janet Morales and shook hands with both David and Maya like they were adults worthy of respect. Sheriff Reeves briefed me on the basics, she said, but I need to see it myself. Are you ready to take us there? They made the trek through the forest, this time as a group of 4. Reeves and Morales both carried equipment, cameras, evidence bags, measurement tools. When the village came into view, both of them stopped walking. Holy hell, Morales whispered. They spent 3 hours documenting everything. Morales took meticulous notes, photographed every structure, measured dimensions. In the underground rooms, she worked with surgical precision, opening drawers, examining documents, recording the contents of each bin. She didn't touch the money, just documented it. At one point, after reviewing a particularly thick folder, she looked at Reeves. This is massive. This is embezzlement on a scale I've never seen. We're talking coordinated theft from multiple public works projects over at least 5 years, probably more. How much are we talking? Reeves asked. She did quick calculations, flipping through more files. Based on what I'm seeing here, conservative estimate, somewhere between $200 and $300 million. David's legs went weak. Maya grabbed his hand. 200 million? David repeated. At least, and that's just what's documented here. There could be more. She held up a folder. This shows falsified invoices for the county highway expansion in 1986. The actual cost was probably $8 million. They billed the county for $19 million. Someone pocketed the difference. And they did this across dozens of projects, Reeves said, looking at the cabinets full of files. Exactly. Roads, schools, water treatment, public buildings. Anything funded by county bonds or state grants. She looked around the room. Whoever assembled this evidence, they were either planning to expose it or use it as leverage. Either way, they created a detailed record of one of the biggest public corruption cases in state history. By the time they climbed back out of the bunker, the sun was setting. They stood in the main cabin, the 4 of them, as the light faded from gold to purple. What happens now? David asked. Morales and Reeves exchanged a look. Now we have to make some difficult decisions. Morales said. This evidence is technically in federal jurisdiction because it involves interstate commerce and federal grant money. But we also need to consider chain of custody, jurisdictional issues, and most importantly, your safety. My safety? David repeated. The statute of limitations may have run out on some of these crimes, she explained. But not all. And some of the people implicated are still alive, still influential. When this becomes public, and it will become public, there's going to be enormous pressure to discredit the evidence or the people who found it. You mean us, Maya said quietly. Morales knelt down to Maya's eye level. Yes, I mean you, which is why we need to move carefully, document everything properly, build an unassailable case before we go public. How long will that take? David asked. Weeks at minimum, possibly months. David shook his head. I can't keep this secret for months. Someone's going to notice we're making trips out here. Someone's going to start asking questions. Then we secure the site tonight, Reeves said. We bring in a team I trust. We document everything, extract all the evidence, and we do it quietly, tomorrow morning at first light. Who's on this team? David asked. State police investigators I've worked with, financial crimes specialists, maybe a federal agent or two, people who can move fast and keep their mouths shut. Morales stood. David, Maya, I need you to understand something. Once we pull this trigger, once we start the official investigation, you become witnesses, key witnesses. Your lives are going to be examined, your backgrounds checked. People are going to look for any reason to discredit you. We have nothing to hide, David said. Good, because they're going to look anyway. She pulled out a business card and handed it to him. This is my personal cell. If anything strange happens, if anyone approaches you asking questions, if you feel threatened in any way, you call me immediately, day or night, understood? David pocketed the card. Understood. They hiked back to the house in darkness, using flashlights to navigate the forest. At the edge of the woods, Reeves stopped them. I'm going to park down the road tonight. Keep an eye on your house, just as a precaution. You really think that's necessary? David asked. I hope not, but I've been doing this long enough to know that when hundreds of millions of dollars are involved, people do desperate things. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every car passing on the road made her heart race. She got out of bed and padded into her father's room. He was awake too, sitting up against the headboard, staring at nothing. Can't sleep either? He asked. She shook her head and climbed into bed next to him, the way she used to when she was smaller. Are we going to be okay? She asked. He wrapped his arm around her. Yes, we're going to be okay. We did the right thing. We told the truth, and the truth matters. Even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. They sat in the dark, father and daughter, holding on to each other as the weight of what they'd discovered pressed down on them. Outside, Sheriff Reeves sat in his truck at the end of the driveway, coffee growing cold in his cup, watching the road and wondering what the morning would bring. And in the forest, the Treehouse village stood silent in the moonlight, keeping its secrets for one more night before the world finally learned what it had been hiding for 37 years. The sun hadn't fully risen when David heard vehicles on the gravel road. He was already awake, had been for hours, watching the window as darkness slowly bled into grey dawn. He moved to the front door and saw them coming, 4 unmarked SUVs rolling slowly up the driveway, deliberate and quiet. Sheriff Reeves emerged from the lead vehicle, followed by 6 others. They wore plain clothes but moved with the coordination of trained professionals. David stepped onto the porch as Maya appeared beside him, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. It's okay, he told her. These are the good guys. Reeves approached with a woman David hadn't met before. She was tall, late 30s, with pulled-back hair and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. David, Maya, this is Special Agent Christine Wade, FBI. She's taking lead on the federal aspects of this investigation. Agent Wade extended her hand. Mr. Chen, thank you for your cooperation. I understand your daughter is the one who made the initial discovery. Maya nodded, suddenly shy under the weight of official attention. You did excellent work, Wade said, her tone warming slightly. The photographs you took are going to be crucial evidence. Not many 8-year-olds would have the presence of mind to document everything so thoroughly. She's smart, David said, his hand on Maya's shoulder. Clearly, Wade turned to Reeves. Sheriff, shall we proceed? The group moved through the forest like a small army, carrying equipment in hard cases, speaking in low voices. David and Maya led the way, the path now familiar, almost routine. But nothing about this felt routine. This felt like the moment when everything became real, when their discovery transformed from secret to investigation, from possibility to consequence. At the village, the team fanned out with practiced efficiency. 2 investigators began photographing and measuring the structures above ground. 3 others, including Wade, followed David and Maya down into the bunker. In the underground rooms, Wade moved with meticulous precision. She examined the filing cabinets first, pulling out folders at random, scanning contents, making notes on a tablet. After 20 minutes, she looked at Reeves. This is even bigger than we thought. These aren't just local projects. Some of these involve state highway funds, federal education grants, EPA water treatment money. This is multi-jurisdictional fraud on a massive scale. How massive? Reeves asked. Wade pulled out a folder labeled Summary Accounting, 1983 through 1988, and opened it. Inside was a handwritten ledger, each line itemizing a project, an amount stolen, and a distribution of funds among what appeared to be 6 different individuals. The columns ran for pages. At the bottom, a total was circled in red ink, $285,473,000. $285 million, Wade said quietly. That's the number they were working with as of their last accounting. And based on the dates, they were still actively stealing when something made them run. What made them run? Maya asked. Wade looked at her thoughtfully. That's what we need to find out. Something spooked them badly enough to abandon this place and everything in it. Either they were about to be caught, or... She stopped. Or what? David pressed. Or someone got eliminated who knew too much, and the rest realized they were in danger. The room fell silent. Above them, footsteps moved across the cabin floor as investigators worked. Wade pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Wade. I need a full forensics team at this location by noon. Yes, the whole team. Evidence extraction, document preservation, financial analysis specialists. And I need a security detail, at least 4 officers. We're going to be here for days. She hung up and turned to David and Maya. I'm afraid your quiet discovery just became a major crime scene. We're going to need detailed statements from both of you. Everything you remember from your first visit, every document you touched, every area you explored. Can you do that? Yes, David said. Whatever you need. They spent the next 3 hours being interviewed. Agent Wade was thorough but not unkind, asking questions that seemed random, but David recognized were designed to establish timeline, credibility, and most importantly, to ensure they hadn't contaminated evidence or removed anything from the site. Maya answered each question with the kind of precise honesty that comes naturally to children who haven't learned to shade truth. Did you tell anyone else about this discovery before calling Sheriff Reeves? Wade asked. No, ma'am, Maya said. Just my dad. Did you post anything on social media? Text any friends? I don't have social media, and I don't really have friends here yet. We just moved. Wade made a note. That's actually going to work in our favor. The fewer people who know about this right now, the better. Why? Maya asked. Wade hesitated, then seemed to decide honesty was appropriate. Because some of the names in those files belong to people who are still alive, still powerful. And when powerful people feel threatened, they do desperate things. They might try to discredit the evidence. They might try to discredit the people who found it. And in extreme cases, she looked at David, they might try to intimidate witnesses. David's jaw tightened. Are you saying we're in danger? I'm saying we need to be cautious, which is why I'm assigning protection. Protection? 2 officers will be stationed near your house. Unmarked car, plain clothes. They'll be discreet, but they'll be there. just until we have a better sense of how people are going to react to this." David wanted to argue, wanted to say it was overkill, but the look in Wade's eyes stopped him. She'd done this before. She knew what happened when investigations like this became public. By afternoon, the forest was full of people. A forensics team had arrived with portable lighting, evidence bags, documentation equipment. They worked with quiet efficiency, cataloging every document, every piece of evidence, taking samples from surfaces to check for fingerprints or DNA. Outside the bunker, other investigators examined the village itself, looking for clues about who built it, when, and why. One investigator, a man in his 50s with silver hair and weathered hands, approached David. "I'm Tom Brennan, structural engineer. Been consulting with the FBI for 20 years. I just wanted to tell you, this place is remarkable. Whoever designed this knew exactly what they were doing. Military-grade construction, hidden in plain sight." "Any idea who built it?" David asked. "Actually, yes." Brennan pulled out a tablet showing a close-up photo of a support beam. Carved into the wood, barely visible, were initials RK and numbers 041787. April 17th, 1987. That's when this beam was installed. And these initials appear on multiple structures. RK built this place, or at least supervised the construction. "Can you track down who RK is?" "Already working on it. Cross-referencing with contractors licensed in this county during the 80s. Shouldn't take long." By evening, David and Maya were exhausted. Wade pulled them aside. "You two should go home, get some rest. We'll be working here through the night, but there's nothing more you can do right now. My team will be in touch tomorrow with follow-up questions." "What happens next?" David asked. "Next, we build a case. We verify every document, trace every transaction, identify every person involved. Then we start bringing people in for questioning." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. White-collar crime investigations are slow, methodical. We can't afford mistakes." They walked home through the forest, now marked with evidence tape and portable lights. The magical quality of the village was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of a crime scene. At the house, they found exactly what Wade had promised. An unmarked sedan parked down the road, 2 people inside, watching. That night, David made spaghetti again, neither of them eating much. They sat at the table in silence until Maya finally spoke. "Do you think the people who built that place were bad people?" David considered the question. "I think they were people who made bad choices. Maybe they started small, skimming a little here and there. Then it got bigger. Then they couldn't stop because stopping meant getting caught. But they had kids? There were kids living up there. Which makes it sadder. Those kids didn't choose any of this. They were just caught in their parents' mistakes." "What happened to them, the kids?" "I don't know, but maybe we'll find out." 3 days later, Tom Brennan called. "We found RK. His name was Robert Kellerman. He was a contractor in Timber Falls from 1979 through 1988. Built half the commercial buildings in town during that period." "Was?" David caught the past tense. "He died in 1992. Car accident on Highway 42. Single vehicle collision, went off the road into a ravine." "Suspicious?" Police report at the time said no. But police reports from that era in this county are now suspect given what we're uncovering. Kellerman's wife died 2 years later. Cancer. They had 3 kids. "What happened to the kids?" "That's where it gets interesting. They went to live with an aunt in Idaho. All 3 of them changed their last names legally when they turned 18, like they were trying to disappear." "Can you find them?" "Already did. The oldest, Sarah, now goes by Sarah Mitchell. She's a teacher in Boise. I called her this morning." David's pulse quickened. "What did she say?" "She hung up on me. But she called back 10 minutes later and asked if we'd found the village. When I confirmed we had, she started crying." "Is she willing to talk?" "She's flying in tomorrow. Said she's been waiting 37 years for someone to find that place. Said her father built it to protect her family when things got too dangerous. And she said she knows where all the bodies are buried." "Metaphorically?" Brennan's pause was heavy. I don't think she was speaking metaphorically. The next afternoon, David and Maya sat in a conference room at the county sheriff's office. Agent Wade was there, along with Sheriff Reeves, Janet Morales, and Tom Brennan. And across the table sat a woman in her mid-40s with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. "This is Sarah Mitchell," Wade said. "Sarah, this is David Chen and his daughter Maya. They're the ones who found the village." Sarah looked at Maya, and her eyes filled with tears. "You're about the age I was when we lived there. 8? Maya nodded. "I was 9 when we moved into the trees. My brother was 7. My sister was 12. We thought it was an adventure at first, like camping. But it wasn't camping. It was hiding." "Hiding from what?" Maya asked softly. Sarah took a shaky breath. "From the people my father was stealing from the people he was stealing with, from anyone who might want to silence us." She looked at Wade. "My father was a contractor, a good one, honest at first. But in 1983 he got approached by a group of local officials. County commissioner, the mayor, a few developers. They had a system. They'd bid high on public projects, win the contracts through rigged bidding, then do the work cheap and pocket the difference. They needed contractors they could control." "And your father agreed?" Morales asked. "At first he said no, but they were persuasive. They knew he was struggling financially. They knew he had 3 kids and a mortgage. They offered him a way out of debt, so he said yes." Sarah's voice cracked. "1 job, that's what he told himself, just 1 job. But 1 became 2, became 10, became too many to count." "When did it go wrong?" Wade asked gently. 1987. One of the other contractors involved, a man named Dennis Vogel, he started keeping records, documenting everything. We think he was planning to go to the authorities, cut a deal, turn state's evidence. But before he could, someone killed him. Made it look like a suicide, but everyone in the group knew better. The room went still. "My father panicked," Sarah continued. "If they killed Dennis for threatening to talk, they'd kill anyone. So he started keeping his own records, everything. Every project, every payment, every person involved. He said it was insurance. If anything happened to him, the truth would come out." "The files in the bunker," David said. "Yes, he spent months compiling them. And then he built the village. Somewhere we could go if things got too dangerous. Somewhere off the grid, hidden but livable. We moved there in May of 1988. "How long did you stay?" Reeves asked. 5 months. We enrolled in homeschool programs. My mum brought supplies every few weeks, making sure no one followed her. My dad would come and go, still working jobs to maintain appearances. But we could feel the walls closing in. Someone was asking questions. Someone was getting suspicious." "What happened in October?" Wade asked. Sarah's hands tightened into fists. "October 10th, 1988. My father came to the village in the middle of the night. He was terrified. He said they knew. He didn't know how, but they knew someone was keeping records. They were looking, and he'd heard rumors that 2 other people in the group had disappeared, just gone. No bodies, no explanations." "So you ran," Maya said. "We ran. Packed what we could carry, left everything else. My father said if we could just get away, get hidden somewhere else, eventually the statute of limitations would run out or someone else would expose them. We went to my aunt's in Idaho. Changed our names when we could. Spent our whole lives looking over our shoulders." "Did your father ever try to go back?" Brennan asked. Sarah shook her head. "He was too scared. And then in 92, his car went off the road. Police said he fell asleep at the wheel, but my father never fell asleep driving. Never." "You think he was killed?" Wade said. "I know he was killed, and I think my mother was killed too, though they made that look like cancer. Poisoning is hard to detect if you do it slowly." The room absorbed this. Wade made notes, her expression unreadable. "Sarah, these records your father kept, do you know who all was involved?" 6 people at the core. Gerald Hartman, the mayor, Commissioner Frank Morrison, developer Richard Sloan, 2 other contractors besides my father, and the county treasurer, Martin Page. He was the one who made it all work, moving money between accounts, falsifying reports. Are any of them still alive? Sarah's smile was bitter. 3. Hartman's in a nursing home, barely coherent, but Morrison's son is now county commissioner, and Page's daughter is the current county treasurer. Funny how these things stay in families. Jesus, Reeves muttered. The money, Morales said. The cash in those bins. Do you know where it came from? That was their emergency fund. Each of them contributed a portion of what they stole, kept it liquid in case they needed to run. 285 million total. But it was blood money, and they all knew it. After Dennis died, after people started disappearing, I think they were all too scared to touch it. Wade leaned forward. Sarah, we need you to testify. Everything you just told us, you need to say it under oath, in court. Are you willing to do that? Sarah looked at Maya, then at David. I've been silent for 37 years, watching these people live comfortable lives while my parents died young, while I had nightmares every night about men coming for us in the dark. Yes, I'm willing to testify. I'm ready to stop hiding. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation accelerated. Federal agents descended on Timber Falls, requesting records, conducting interviews, executing search warrants. The current county treasurer, Michelle Page, was brought in for questioning when agents found irregularities in current accounts that suggested the family business of embezzlement had continued into a new generation. David's phone started ringing. Reporters wanted comments. Lawyers wanted to talk about book deals and movie rights. He ignored them all. But he couldn't ignore the attention at work. Co-workers asked questions. His boss pulled him aside, concerned about distractions. The truth was beginning to ripple outward, touching everything. And then the threats started. First, it was subtle. A car following him to work, always staying just far enough back. Then his tires were slashed one night while he slept, all 4 of them, a message that couldn't be mistaken. Sheriff Reeves increased protection, putting an officer outside their house 24 hours a day. Agent Wade moved them temporarily into a hotel under assumed names. This is temporary, Wade assured them. Once arrests are made, once people are in custody, the threat level should decrease. Should? David repeated. These are desperate people protecting their legacies, their fortunes, their freedom. I won't lie to you, David. This is dangerous. But we're close. Very close. Maya had stopped going to school. Too risky, Wade said. A tutor came to the hotel room instead, a kind woman who pretended not to notice the armed officer in the hallway. At night, Maya had nightmares about men breaking down doors, about her father disappearing like Sarah's father had. David held her, promised her they were safe, tried to believe it himself. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the discovery, Wade called David's cell. Turn on the news. He did. Every local channel carried the same story. FBI arrests 3 in historic embezzlement case. Footage showed people being led from their homes in handcuffs, Michelle Page, County Commissioner Daniel Morrison, and a retired developer named Thomas Sloan, Richard's son. The anchor's voice was breathless with excitement. Authorities say the investigation centers on systematic theft of public funds dating back to the 1980s, with possible connections to several suspicious deaths. The estimated total of stolen funds exceeds $285 million, making this potentially the largest public corruption case in state history. David watched in stunned silence. Maya appeared beside him, staring at the screen. Is it over? She asked. I don't know, he admitted. It wasn't over. The arrests triggered a firestorm. Some in the community rallied behind David and Maya, calling them heroes who'd exposed corruption. Others, particularly those connected to the arrested families, called them troublemakers, outsiders who'd destroyed good people's reputations. The town fractured along lines of belief and denial. David's landlord called. The owner had decided to sell the property, needed them out in 30 days. David knew it wasn't really about selling. It was about pressure, about making them leave. But Wade intervened. You're protected witnesses in a federal case. Witness intimidation is a serious crime. Your landlord will suddenly discover his plans have changed. She was right. The next day, the landlord called back, apologetic, said he'd reconsidered. But the message was clear. Stay, and life in Timber Falls would be difficult. One evening, as David and Maya sat in their hotel room, there was a knock at the door. The officer outside checked, then nodded to David. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-70s, using a cane. Her face was lined with age and something heavier. Grief. "Mr. Chen? My name is Dorothy Vogel. I'm Dennis Vogel's widow." David's breath caught. Dennis Vogel, the contractor who'd been killed for trying to expose the scheme. He invited her in, offered her a chair. She settled slowly, her hands shaking. "I wanted to thank you, and your daughter. For 36 years, everyone told me my husband killed himself, that he was depressed, unstable, but I knew. I knew Dennis didn't kill himself. He was scared, yes, but he was brave. He was going to do the right thing." Tears ran down her weathered cheeks. "When I heard they'd found evidence, when I heard they were finally investigating, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in decades." Maya moved closer to her. "I'm sorry about your husband." Dorothy smiled through her tears. "Don't be sorry, sweetheart. Be proud. You gave me something I thought I'd never have. Justice. Even if it's late, even if Dennis isn't here to see it, it matters. Truth always matters." After she left, David found Maya standing at the window, looking out at the parking lot and the mountains beyond. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how many people were hurt by what those men did, how many families lost money or lost people or lost faith, and I'm thinking about how one discovery can matter so much." David pulled her close. "Your discovery changed everything. But I was just curious. I just wanted to explore. And that's how truth gets found. Someone gets curious. Someone asks questions. Someone looks where others are afraid to look." The trials began in spring. David and Maya both testified, describing the discovery, the village, the evidence. Sarah Mitchell testified for 3 days, detailing the scheme, naming names, providing context that only someone who'd lived through it could give. Dorothy Vogel testified about her husband's final weeks, his fear, his determination to do right. The evidence was overwhelming. Documents matched testimony. Financial records confirmed theft. By summer, all 3 defendants had been convicted. Michelle Page received 15 years. Daniel Morrison received 12. Thomas Sloan, who'd inherited both his father's stolen fortune and his father's secrets, received 20. The recovered money, all $285 million and change, was returned to state and county coffers, earmarked for the very public works projects it had been stolen from decades earlier. Schools got new buildings, roads got proper repairs, the water treatment plant got upgrades it had needed for 40 years, and David and Maya received something they hadn't expected. The state awarded them a whistleblower reward, 5% of the recovered funds, $14 million. David stared at the check for a full minute, unable to process the number. 14 million. More money than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes of construction work, enough to change everything. "What are we going to do with it?" Maya asked. David thought about the years of struggle, the nights counting change, the constant weight of financial stress. And then he thought about Dorothy Vogel's tears, about Sarah Mitchell's courage, about justice delayed but finally delivered. "We're going to do something that matters," he said. 6 months after the verdicts, David and Maya stood in front of a renovated building on Main Street in Timber Falls. The old brick structure had once housed a failing insurance office. Now it bore a new sign, the Kellerman Foundation for Justice and Truth, named after Robert Kellerman, the contractor who'd tried to protect his family and preserve evidence even at the cost of his own life. The foundation had 3 missions. First, to support families of whistleblowers who faced retaliation or danger for speaking truth to power. Second, to provide legal assistance for people trying to expose corruption in their communities. And third, to educate young people about civic responsibility, about the importance of asking questions and demanding accountability from those in authority. Maya had insisted on that last part. "Kids need to know their voices matter," she'd said. "That being curious isn't bad, that finding truth is important." Sarah Mitchell had flown in for the opening. She stood beside them now, tears in her eyes as she looked at her father's name on the building. "He would have been so proud," she whispered. to know that all his fear, all his sacrifice, led to something good. Inside, the foundation had hired 6 staff members: a director, 2 lawyers specializing in whistleblower protection, a financial investigator, an educator, and a community outreach coordinator. They'd already received 43 requests for assistance from people across the state who'd witnessed corruption but were afraid to come forward. Dorothy Vogel had donated Dennis's papers to the foundation. Notebooks where he'd documented his own concerns about the embezzlement scheme, letters he'd written but never sent, evidence of his courage. They'd created a small museum space on the 2nd floor, preserving the history of what had happened in Timber Falls as a cautionary tale and an inspiration. The local newspaper, which had initially been skeptical of the investigation, ran a front-page story on the foundation's opening. The headline read, "From Discovery to Justice, How One Girl's Curiosity Changed Everything." They interviewed Maya, who was now 9 years old, but spoke with a maturity that made her seem older. "I didn't know what I was finding," she told the reporter. "I just knew it felt important, and my dad taught me that important things shouldn't be ignored just because they're scary or complicated." The reporter asked if she regretted the discovery, given all the upheaval it had caused. Maya thought carefully before answering. "No, because doing the right thing isn't about whether it's easy. It's about whether it's right, and exposing the truth is always right, even when it's hard." But not everyone in Timber Falls was ready to embrace the new reality. The families of the convicted officials maintained their innocence, claimed they'd been railroaded, victims of overzealous federal prosecutors and circumstantial evidence. They hired expensive lawyers, filed appeals, and used their remaining influence to make life difficult for anyone associated with the case. David found work hard to come by at first. Contractors who'd been friendly suddenly didn't return his calls. Projects he'd been promised went to others. The message was clear. There was a price for disrupting the established order, even when that order was corrupt. But slowly, things shifted. New businesses moved to Timber Falls, attracted by the cleanup of local government and the promise of honest dealing. These businesses hired David for renovations and new construction. His reputation for quality work and integrity, both in his craft and his character, spread. Within a year, he had more work than he could handle alone. He hired employees, people who'd also been on the outside, who appreciated a boss who valued honesty over connections. Maya returned to regular school, though it took time to adjust. Some kids treated her like a celebrity, wanting to hear every detail of the discovery. Others, children of the displaced power structure, were cruel. She found notes in her locker calling her a snitch, a troublemaker, worse. There were days she came home crying, days David considered moving away, starting over somewhere they weren't known. But Maya refused to leave. "Running away is what scared people do," she said. "We're not scared anymore." She was right, though David hadn't realized when it happened. Somewhere between the discovery and the trials, between the threats and the testimony, they'd stopped being afraid. They'd found something stronger than fear: purpose. The foundation's work began making real impact. A county clerk in Eastern Oregon used their legal assistance to expose a kickback scheme involving land permits. A teacher in Medford got protection after documenting financial fraud in her school district. A construction worker in Bend received support when he reported safety violations his employer had been hiding. Each case was different, but they all shared one thread. Someone had seen something wrong and needed help making it right. Maya became involved in the foundation's educational programs. She'd visit schools, talking to classes about citizenship and courage. At first, David worried she was too young, that the responsibility was too heavy. But she thrived. She had a way of connecting with other kids, of making complex ideas simple without being condescending. "Truth isn't complicated," she'd tell them. "Truth is just what really happened, and everyone deserves to know what really happened, especially when it affects their lives." One afternoon, during a visit to a middle school in neighboring Jackson County, a girl raised her hand. "But what if telling the truth gets you in trouble? What if people get mad at you?" Maya nodded, understanding the fear behind the question. People probably will get mad. Truth makes people uncomfortable sometimes, especially people who benefit from lies. But you have to ask yourself, what's more important? Being liked by people who are doing wrong or doing right even if it's hard? The girl thought about this, then nodded slowly. After the presentation, the girl approached Maya privately. "There's something happening at my dad's work," she said quietly. "Something I think is wrong, but I don't know what to do." Maya took her hand. "Let's talk to someone who can help." It turned out the girl's father worked for a construction company that was dumping hazardous waste illegally to save disposal costs. The foundation's investigators looked into it, gathered evidence, and reported it to environmental authorities. The company was fined heavily. The father, who'd been documenting the illegal dumping because he was troubled by it but afraid to speak up, received whistleblower protection and kept his job. The owner went to jail. Cases like this kept coming. The foundation had struck a nerve, tapped into a deep hunger for accountability that had been suppressed for too long. People were tired of corruption going unpunished, of powerful figures escaping consequences, of feeling powerless to change broken systems. By the second year, the Kellerman Foundation had expanded. They opened satellite offices in 3 other Oregon cities. They partnered with journalism schools to train investigative reporters. They created a legal defense fund for whistleblowers facing retaliation. And they established an annual award, the Robert Kellerman Courage Prize, given to individuals who'd risked everything to expose wrongdoing. The first recipient was Sarah Mitchell. She stood on stage at the award ceremony, older now but standing straighter, no longer burdened by decades of enforced silence. "When I was a little girl hiding in trees," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I thought I'd lost everything, my home, my safety, my father, my childhood, and I did lose those things. But what I didn't lose was the knowledge that truth matters, that justice, even delayed, is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the smallest voice, the youngest voice, can change everything." She looked directly at Maya, sitting in the front row. "This little girl did what my father tried to do. She brought truth into the light. And she reminded all of us that courage doesn't require age or power or resources. It just requires choosing to do what's right, even when everything else says to look away." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Maya felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, let herself feel the weight and the wonder of how one curiosity-driven morning had transformed so many lives, but the impact rippled further than anyone had anticipated. The case in Timber Falls had exposed weaknesses in oversight systems across the state. In response, Oregon passed new legislation requiring independent audits of all public works projects over a certain threshold. They created a state whistleblower protection office with real enforcement power. They mandated transparency in government contracting and established severe penalties for officials found guilty of embezzlement or fraud. Other states took notice. Within 3 years, 12 states had passed similar reforms, all citing the Timber Falls case as inspiration. The federal government updated guidelines for investigating public corruption. Law schools began teaching the case as an example of successful whistleblower collaboration with law enforcement. David watched all of this with a sense of unreality. His daughter had found a treehouse. That's all it was supposed to be, a child's discovery of a forgotten structure in the woods. But that discovery had cascaded into something vast, into legislation and reform and systemic change. Sometimes he'd wake in the night, overwhelmed by the improbability of it all. "You okay?" Maya asked one evening, finding him staring out the window. "Just thinking about how different our lives are now." "Better or worse?" He considered. "Different, fuller, more meaningful maybe, but heavier too." "Heavy like bad or heavy like important?" He smiled at her wisdom. "Heavy like important." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because I think we're doing something good. I think Dad Kellerman would be proud. And I think all those people who got hurt by the stealing, I think they're glad someone finally told the truth." She was right. Letters came regularly to the foundation from people whose lives had been tangentially affected by the Timber Falls embezzlement. a woman whose late husband had lost his pension when a county retirement fund was looted, a man who'd watched his neighborhood school crumble because maintenance funds had been stolen, a retired teacher who'd seen classroom budgets cut year after year while corrupt officials lived in mansions. They all expressed the same sentiment: thank you for caring enough to tell the truth. The Treehouse village itself became a historical site. The county, once anxious to tear it down and erase the embarrassing reminder of corruption, instead preserved it. They built a proper trail through the forest, installed informational plaques explaining the history, and offered guided tours. It became a destination for school field trips, a place where kids could see physical evidence that ordinary people could challenge injustice and win. Maya visited sometimes, walking the paths she'd first discovered alone. The structures had been stabilized and weatherproofed, made safe for visitors, but they retained their ghostly quality, their sense of being frozen in a moment of desperate hope. She'd stand in the main cabin, looking at the hatch that had changed everything, and marvel at how thin the line was between secrecy and revelation, between hidden and known. One spring morning, 3 years after the initial discovery, Maya found David in his office at the foundation. He was reading a letter, his expression troubled. "What is it?" she asked. He handed it to her. The letter was from Thomas Sloan, the developer currently serving 20 years for his role in the embezzlement scheme. He'd written from prison. "Dear Mr. Chen and Maya, I know I have no right to contact you. I know what my family did, what I continued, caused immeasurable harm. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that your courage, Maya's courage especially, changed me. In prison, I've had time to think about the choices I made, the choices my father made. I inherited his business and his crimes without questioning either. I told myself everyone did it, that it was just how things worked, that I was owed the wealth and status because of who I was. But you, a child, saw something wrong and didn't make excuses, didn't rationalize, just asked questions and told the truth. I've started working with other inmates, teaching financial literacy, helping them understand how white-collar crime works so they can recognize it and resist it. It's small, it doesn't undo the damage, but maybe it's a start. Thank you for showing me that courage looks like choosing truth over comfort. Respectfully, Thomas Sloan." Maya read it twice. "Do you believe him?" David shrugged. "I don't know. People in prison say a lot of things. Some mean it, some don't. But I suppose we hope people can change, that facing consequences can lead to genuine transformation. Should we write back? Do you want to?" Maya thought about it. "Yes, because if he's really trying to do better, we should encourage that. And if he's not, then at least we tried." They wrote back together, a short letter acknowledging his words and encouraging his work with other inmates. They didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't theirs to give. But they offered recognition that change is possible, that redemption requires work but isn't impossible. Months later, they received a package. Inside were notebooks, lesson plans Thomas had developed for teaching ethics and financial accountability to inmates. Also included was a program proposal for a prison education initiative focused on white-collar crime prevention. "He's actually doing it," David said, impressed despite himself. "He's actually trying to make amends." Maya smiled. "See, truth doesn't just punish bad things, it can inspire good things too." The foundation eventually funded a pilot program based on Thomas's proposals, partnering with the state corrections system. It was controversial. Some argued they were helping the very people who'd caused harm. But Maya defended it publicly. "Punishment is part of justice," she told a reporter. "But so is prevention. If we can help one person understand why corruption is wrong and give them tools to resist it, we prevent future crimes. We protect future communities. That's worth doing, even if it means working with people who made terrible choices." Her articulation of complex moral questions continued to amaze people. At 12 years old, she spoke at a national conference on government transparency, sharing a panel with former prosecutors and ethics professors. She held her own, answering questions with clarity and conviction. "How did you know what you found was important?" an audience member asked. "I didn't, not at first," Maya admitted. But I knew it felt wrong that all that money and all those papers were hidden away. I knew secrets that big usually mean someone's being hurt. So I told my dad, and we told people whose job it is to investigate. We didn't have to understand everything. We just had to trust that truth matters enough to bring it forward. Were you ever tempted to keep the money? The audience laughed nervously at the bold question, but Maya answered seriously. Of course. We were struggling. That money would have changed our lives. But my dad taught me that how you get something matters as much as what you get. Stolen money stays stolen even if you find it. Taking it would have made us part of the crime instead of part of the solution. David watched from the audience, proud beyond words. His daughter had grown from a curious 8-year-old into a thoughtful advocate for justice, and she'd done it while staying grounded, staying kind, staying real. They still lived in Timber Falls, though they'd bought a house now, a real house with rooms for both of them and space for visiting foundation staff. The town had changed around them. The old guard had lost power. New leadership emerged, younger people committed to transparency and accountability. The county's credit rating improved as honest budgeting replaced creative accounting. Businesses grew as corruption's chilling effect on economic development faded. Not everyone was happy. The displaced families never reconciled with their fall from grace. They moved away mostly, unable to live in a town that knew their shame. Their departure created space for new people, new ideas, new possibilities. Maya started high school as something of a local legend. Most kids regarded her with respect, a few with resentment. She'd learned to navigate both. She joined the debate team, served on student council, and volunteered weekly at the foundation. She was, in many ways, a normal teenager, but she'd seen and done things most adults never experience. It gave her a gravitas that set her apart. One October afternoon, 5 years after the initial discovery, Maya hiked out to the Treehouse village alone. She did this sometimes, needing to reconnect with where it all started. She climbed to the main cabin and sat on the deck, legs dangling over the edge, watching light filter through the canopy. She thought about the Kellerman family, about the fear they must have felt living here. She thought about Robert Kellerman's decision to document everything, to create evidence, even knowing it put him in danger. She thought about Sarah and her siblings, children who'd lost their childhood to their father's choices and their father's courage. "I hope we did right by you," she whispered to the forest. "I hope this is what you would have wanted." The wind moved through the trees, ancient and knowing, and Maya felt, though she couldn't explain how, that somewhere, somehow the Kellermans knew and approved. That evening, she came home to find David cooking dinner, the house warm and filled with the smell of garlic and tomatoes. They'd come so far from those early days of stretching hamburger helper, of counting change, of wondering if they'd make rent. "Good day?" he asked. "Yeah, went to the village." He nodded, understanding. "I still think about that morning you told me you'd found something. How scared I was. How much I wanted to protect you from whatever was coming." "Could you have?" "No, but I didn't know that yet." He stirred the sauce. "I'm glad you found it, Maya. I'm glad you were brave enough to tell me, and I'm glad we were brave enough to do something about it." "Me too." They ate dinner talking about normal things: homework, foundation business, an upcoming trip to visit Sarah and her family in Idaho. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one that included purpose alongside the mundane. Later, as Maya did homework at the kitchen table, there was a knock at the door. David answered to find Agent Wade, retired now from the FBI but still consulting on complex cases. "Christine, what brings you by?" She smiled. "Actually, I wanted to talk to Maya, if that's okay." Maya looked up, curious. Wade sat across from her, pulling out a folder. "I'm teaching a course next semester at the FBI Academy, Case Studies in Successful Investigations. I wanted to include Timber Falls, but more than that, I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to speak to the class. Tell them your perspective, what it's like to be the civilian who finds evidence and has to decide what to do with it." Maya blinked. "Me? Talk to FBI agents?" "Future FBI agents. They need to understand that their job isn't just to catch criminals. It's to support and protect people like you who take enormous risks to expose wrongdoing. They need to hear directly from a witness what it felt like, what you needed, what helped and what didn't. Maya looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, she said, I'll do it. 6 months later, Maya stood in front of 60 FBI Academy trainees, telling her story. She walked them through the discovery, the fear, the decision to come forward. She explained what had helped: Agent Wade's professionalism, Sheriff Reeves's protection, the Foundation's support, and she explained what had been hard: the threats, the isolation, the weight of knowing lives hung on her testimony. The hardest part, she told them, wasn't the discovery or even the danger. It was the waiting for you all to build your case, waiting for trials, waiting to know if telling the truth would actually matter. As investigators, you have to understand that witnesses are living in suspended animation while you do your work. Every day that passes is a day they're wondering if they made the right choice, if anyone will believe them, if justice will actually come. One trainee raised his hand. How did you stay strong during that time? Maya thought carefully. I remembered why I told the truth in the first place. Not because I thought I'd get rewarded or become famous, but because people had been hurt by what was hidden in those files. People lost money, opportunities, maybe even lives. They deserved to know. They deserved justice. So when it got hard, I thought about them, and that made it easier. The trainees gave her a standing ovation. Afterward, several approached with questions, with thanks, with admissions that her story had changed how they thought about their future work. Agent Wade pulled David aside as they were leaving. She's extraordinary. You know that, right? I do. Every day I'm amazed by her. The Foundation is doing remarkable work, changing systems, changing culture, and it all started because one little girl was curious enough to explore and brave enough to tell what she found. David smiled. She'd say she was just being a kid. Kids are curious. Most kids would have run away, or told their friends and turned it into gossip. Maya did neither. She thought about what mattered and acted accordingly. That's not just curiosity, that's character. As they drove home, Maya was quiet, processing the day. You okay? David asked. Yeah, just thinking about how everything is connected. How me finding that village led to trials, which led to the Foundation, which led to helping other people expose other bad things. Like dropping a stone in water and watching the ripples spread. That's exactly what it is. Do you think we'll ever stop finding ripples? David considered. I don't think they ever stop. I think when you change something fundamental, when you shift how people think about truth and courage and justice, those ripples just keep going. Maybe someday, someone we've never met will do something brave because they heard your story, and someone else will do something brave because of that person. Truth has a way of multiplying. Years continued to pass. The Foundation grew, helping hundreds of cases, training thousands of students, shifting cultural attitudes about whistleblowing from shameful to heroic. David's construction business thrived, built on the same principles of honesty and quality that had guided everything else in their lives. Maya graduated high school as valedictorian, giving a speech about the responsibility that comes with knowledge, about how awareness demands action. She was accepted to every college she applied to, full scholarships everywhere, universities eager to claim the girl who'd changed Oregon's approach to government accountability. She chose to attend the State University's Honors College, staying close to the Foundation, wanting to remain involved in the work that had become her life's purpose. She majored in public policy and ethics, planning to attend law school, to become the kind of lawyer who could help whistleblowers navigate the complex terrain between discovery and justice. On her 18th birthday, they held a party at the Foundation. Sarah Mitchell flew in, along with Dorothy Vogel's daughter, representatives from the other families affected by the original embezzlement, staff from current and former cases. It was a celebration not just of Maya's birthday, but of everything that had grown from one morning's discovery. Late in the evening, as guests mingled, Sarah pulled Maya aside. I have something for you. She handed her a small wooden box, worn smooth with age. Inside was a pocket watch, tarnished but beautiful, This was my father's. He carried it every day. After he died, I kept it as a reminder that time matters, that what we do with our time defines us. I want you to have it." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I can't take this. It's your father's. And he would want you to have it. You finished what he started. You brought his truth into the world. You made his sacrifice matter." Sarah closed Maya's fingers around the watch. "Carry it. Remember that courage doesn't expire, that truth told late is still truth, and that every moment we choose right over easy, we honor everyone who made that choice before us." Maya held the watch carefully, feeling the weight of history and responsibility and hope all at once. As the party wound down and guests departed, David and Maya stood outside the foundation, looking up at the building that had grown from tragedy into triumph. "Think we'll still be doing this in 10 years?" Maya asked. "I hope so. As long as there are people who need support for doing the right thing, there's work for us to do. And if we succeed, if we actually change things enough that no one needs whistleblower protection anymore?" David laughed. "Then we'll have succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. But I don't think human nature changes that fast. There will always be people who choose power over principle, profit over people, which means there will always be a need for people willing to stand up and say, 'This is wrong.' Then I guess we'd better keep working." "I guess we'd better." They stood in comfortable silence, father and daughter, ordinary people who'd done something extraordinary, not because they were special, but because when faced with a choice between comfort and conscience, they'd chosen conscience. The foundation's lights glowed warm in the gathering dusk. Inside, staff members finished up work, preparing cases, supporting witnesses, educating the next generation. Outside, the mountains stood eternal, forests stretching dark and deep, holding their own secrets still. But one secret had been released. One truth had been told. And from that single act of courage, 1,000 other acts had followed, would continue following, rippling outward through time in ways neither David nor Maya could fully comprehend. Because truth, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. Justice, once demanded, cannot be ignored. And courage, once demonstrated, becomes contagious. Anyone can change the world if they're curious enough to ask questions and brave enough to act on the answers. As the stars emerged overhead and the foundation closed for another day, Maya Chen looked at her father and smiled. They'd come so far from that morning when she'd returned from the forest with trembling hands and impossible photos. They'd endured threats, trials, scrutiny and doubt. But they'd also witnessed transformation. Of systems, of people, of possibilities. The little girl who found a treehouse village had become a young woman building a better world. The single father who'd barely made rent had become a successful businessman funding justice. And the $285 million hidden beneath the forest floor had been restored to the public good, funding schools and roads and all the infrastructure that makes civilization possible. But the real treasure wasn't the money. It was the lesson learned and shared and multiplied that ordinary people hold extraordinary power when they refuse to look away from truth. Because for Maya and for every person her story would touch, discovery wasn't just about finding something hidden. It was about having the courage to bring it into the light, and that courage, once ignited, never truly goes out. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering the truth with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that one person really can make a difference.